Keanu Reeves surprises single moms struggling to pay for kids' lunches. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Or please complete our 1,000 subscribers and don't miss the end of the video. The city streets of Chicago were wet and glistening under a steady drizzle as Sarah Jenkins, a single mom, hurried into the small diner at the corner of Elm and Fifth. Clutching her purse tightly, she sat down at the counter, hoping for a moment of respite from her hectic day. Her thoughts were consumed with worry about her mounting bills, her kids' school lunches, and the constant juggling act she performed just to stay afloat. Behind her, in a quiet booth, sat Keanu Reeves, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. He'd come to Chicago for a quick, low-profile visit, hoping to enjoy a quiet meal without drawing attention. But as Sarah's conversation with the waitress grew louder, his ears perked up. The waitress, kind but firm, explained to Sarah that the diner couldn't offer a meal on credit. Embarrassed and on the verge of tears, Sarah stood up to leave, unaware that her situation had deeply moved the stranger in the booth. Keanu watched Sarah leave, her shoulders slumped in defeat. He didn't need to know her full story to feel her pain. His own experiences with hardship had taught him the value of small acts of kindness. Without hesitation, he flagged down the waitress and paid for Sarah's uneaten meal. But something tugged at him, a sense that more needed to be done. After leaving the diner, he made a phone call to the school district nearest to the address Sarah had mentioned in passing. Posing as a concerned community member, he learned that several families, including Sarah's, struggled with unpaid school lunch debts. Keanu quietly arranged to pay off not only Sarah's debts but those of all families in her situation. He insisted on remaining anonymous, leaving behind a simple note to be delivered to Sarah. Never stop believing in yourself. Kindness is the spark that changes lives. The next morning, Sarah received an unexpected phone call from the school. Her heart sank as she assumed it was another reminder about her overdue lunch payments. Instead, the secretary's cheerful tone took her by surprise. "Sarah, I'm calling to let you know your balance has been cleared. In fact, all lunch debts have been paid off for this term." Sarah was stunned. "Who did this?" she asked, her voice trembling. The secretary hesitated, explaining that the donor wished to remain anonymous. However, a small note had been left for her. As Sarah held the handwritten message in her hands, she read the words, "Never stop believing in yourself. Kindness is the spark that changes lives." Tears filled her eyes. Someone out there believed in her enough to make such a difference, and she was determined to find out who it was. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Sarah thought back to the previous day at the diner. She recalled the stranger sitting quietly in the corner booth, his hat pulled low and his demeanor unassuming. Could it have been him? Something about his quiet presence had felt significant, though she hadn't paid much attention at the time. Determined to thank the person responsible, Sarah returned to the diner that afternoon. She approached the waitress who had been working the previous day and hesitantly asked, "Do you remember the man who was sitting in the booth when I was here?" The waitress nodded. "Yes, I do. He paid for your meal after you left. Seemed like a nice guy." "Did he leave a name?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with hope. The waitress shook her head. "No, but now that I think about it, he looked kind of familiar." The puzzle pieces began to align in Sarah's mind, but the truth still felt too far-fetched. That evening, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with her two kids, Ella and Max. As they ate dinner, she shared the news about the paid-off lunch debts and the mysterious note. "Do you think it was a superhero?" Max asked, his eyes wide with wonder. Ella, the more practical of the two, chimed in. "Maybe it was someone famous, like from the movies." Their innocent suggestions sparked something in Sarah. What if the man really was someone she'd recognize if she looked hard enough? Inspired by her children's curiosity, she decided to investigate. The next day, armed with nothing but her determination and the memory of the man in the diner, Sarah began her quest to uncover the identity of her anonymous benefactor. Sarah's search led her to explore local leads. She visited the diner again, hoping to learn more about the mysterious man. This time, she spoke to the diner's manager, who recalled that the man had paid in cash and left quickly. "But he did mention something about staying in town for a few days," the manager added. Later that afternoon, while walking down Michigan Avenue, Sarah noticed a small crowd gathered outside a bookstore. Curious, she approached and overheard whispers about a celebrity sighting. As she peered through the crowd, her heart raced. There, signing autographs and chatting with fans, was the same man she'd seen at the diner. Her mind reeled as she realized who he was, Keanu Reeves. Sarah hesitated, unsure if she should approach him. Would he even remember her? Would he admit to his act of kindness? Summoning her courage, she stepped forward and waited patiently as he greeted the fans around him. When her turn came, Keanu looked up, his warm eyes meeting hers. "You were at the diner," she said softly, her voice trembling. Keanu's expression remained calm, but knowing. "I might have been," he replied with a faint smile. "And you might be the reason my kids' lunches are paid for," she added, her gratitude clear. Keanu nodded slightly but quickly diverted the conversation. "I just wanted to remind you that good things happen when you keep believing." Sarah's voice faltered as she tried to express her gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you. What you did, it means everything to my family." Keanu smiled, his humility evident. "You don't have to thank me. Just keep doing what you're doing for your kids. That's the real inspiration." Sarah was struck by how genuine he seemed. She had expected someone like him to brush off her words or even deny his involvement entirely. But instead, he looked her in the eye with sincerity. Before she could ask him why he had done it, a bookstore employee signaled the end of the signing session. Keanu placed a hand on her shoulder briefly and said, "Take care of yourself and your kids." Then he disappeared into the back of the store, leaving Sarah with more questions than answers. Back at home, Sarah couldn't stop replaying their conversation in her mind. The note, his quiet generosity, and his words stayed with her. For the first time in months, she felt a spark of hope. If someone like him believed in her, maybe she could start believing in herself too. That evening, she sat down with Ella and Max. "Kids," she began, "something amazing happened today. I met the man who helped us, and you know what he said? He told me to never stop believing." She explained the importance of kindness and how they could all find ways to help others, no matter how small. Her children listened intently, and for the first time in a long while, their home was filled with hope instead of worry. Inspired by Keanu's act of kindness, Sarah decided it was time to pay it forward. She couldn't afford grand gestures, but she could start small. The next morning, she baked a batch of cookies and brought them to the school staff room as a thank you to the teachers who worked so hard for her kids and others like them. She also volunteered to help organize the upcoming school fundraiser. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Parents and teachers alike appreciated her enthusiasm and began to rally around her. Though she still had her struggles, Sarah found herself smiling more, bolstered by a sense of purpose. Word of Sarah's newfound involvement in the community began to spread. Other parents, inspired by her story, started pitching in where they could. One father volunteered to coach the after-school soccer team, while a group of moms organized a clothing drive for families in need. The school principal, touched by the community's growing support, decided to implement a kindness fund to help cover costs for students who couldn't afford meals, supplies, or field trips. Though no one spoke Keanu's name aloud, his generosity had set off a chain reaction, proving that one act of kindness could indeed change lives. A local journalist caught wind of the school's transformed atmosphere and reached out to Sarah for an interview. Hesitant at first, she eventually agreed, hoping to share the story without revealing too much about Keanu's involvement. She spoke of the anonymous donor who had paid off the lunch debts and how his note had inspired her to give back. When the article was published, it captured the attention of more than just the local community. Readers across Chicago and beyond were moved by Sarah's story and began reaching out to offer donations and support. The Kindness Fund quickly grew, allowing the school to expand its programs for underprivileged students. Meanwhile, Keanu kept tabs on the story from afar. He read the article and smiled, proud to see how his small gesture had blossomed into something far greater. One afternoon, while filming wrapped up earlier than expected, he decided to return to the diner. He sat quietly in the same booth, hoping to go unnoticed. This time, Sarah spotted him immediately. She approached with a grateful yet playful smile. "Back for another life-changing act of kindness?" she teased. Keanu chuckled. "Just here for the coffee," he replied. They sat and talked for a while, sharing stories about resilience, family, and the power of small actions. Though he remained modest, Sarah could tell he was pleased with how things had unfolded. During their conversation, Sarah mentioned that the school was planning a fundraising gala to sustain the Kindness Fund. Without missing a beat, Keanu offered to donate an item for auction, a signed leather jacket from one of his iconic films. "It's not much," he said, downplaying the significance, "but it might help." Sarah was floored by his continued generosity. "You're doing more than enough," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. Keanu simply shrugged. Sometimes the smallest things make the biggest difference. The leather jacket arrived at the school a week later, carefully packaged with a handwritten note from Keanu. "This jacket has been through a lot, just like all of us. It's not about the jacket itself, but the stories it represents, of perseverance, courage, and hope. May it raise funds for even more stories to be written." The principal couldn't believe her eyes as she unpacked it. News of the auction item spread quickly, creating a buzz across Chicago. Movie buffs, collectors, and fans from all over the state expressed interest in attending the gala. The school's modest fundraiser was suddenly turning into a high-profile event. Sarah threw herself into planning the fundraiser. She worked closely with the PTA and school staff to transform the gymnasium into a magical venue. Decorations, lights, and tables were set up, and local businesses donated food and drinks for the event. Despite the excitement, Sarah felt a pang of nervousness. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and she worried about whether the fundraiser would succeed. Her kids, Ella and Max, offered their own support by helping with decorations. "Mom," Max said, "this is going to be amazing. You're amazing." His words gave Sarah the boost she needed to keep pushing forward. The night of the gala arrived, and the school gym was packed with attendees. Parents, teachers, and community members mingled with out-of-town guests, all eager to support the Kindness Fund. The jacket was displayed prominently at the center of the auction table, drawing admiration from the crowd. Sarah stood nervously by the refreshment table, scanning the room. She hoped Keanu might show up, even though he'd told her he couldn't promise anything. Just as she was about to give up hope, she noticed a familiar figure slip quietly through the side door. Keanu, dressed casually but exuding his usual charm, gave her a small nod and disappeared into the crowd. The auctioneer took the stage, and the room fell silent as bidding on the leather jacket began. To Sarah's astonishment, the opening bid started at $5,000. The price climbed rapidly as eager fans competed for the iconic piece. By the time the gavel struck, the jacket had sold for $50,000, enough to sustain the Kindness Fund for several years. Applause erupted, and Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. She glanced toward Keanu, who remained inconspicuous in the corner. He caught her eye and gave her a thumbs up, his smile subtle but filled with pride. After the auction, Sarah approached Keanu, unable to contain her emotions. "You've changed everything," she said, her voice shaking. "Not just for my family, but for so many others. I don't even know how to thank you." Keanu shook his head. "It's not about me. This was always about you and the community. You're the one who made this happen." He gestured to the room filled with laughter and joy. "This is your story, Sarah. I just played a small part." The success of the gala didn't just raise funds, it raised spirits. The Kindness Fund was now a permanent feature of the school, ensuring that no child would have to go without meals or basic supplies. Sarah became a local hero, her story inspiring others across Chicago and beyond to start similar initiatives in their own communities. Keanu slipped out quietly before the night ended, leaving Sarah with one last note. "You've created a ripple effect that will last for generations. Never stop believing. K." Months later, Sarah learned that Keanu was filming a new movie in the area. Feeling compelled to give back, she organized a surprise lunch for the cast and crew, featuring food from local businesses. Keanu was visibly touched when he realized Sarah was behind it. "You didn't have to do this," he said with a grin. Sarah replied, "I learned from the best." Inspired by her mom's actions, Ella proposed starting a kindness club at school. The club would encourage students to perform small acts of kindness, from writing notes of encouragement to helping younger kids with homework. With her teacher's support, the club quickly became popular, spreading positivity throughout the school. The ripple effect of Keanu's gesture continued to grow. Local businesses began offering discounts to struggling families, and community members started organizing food drives and free workshops for parents. The neighborhood, once plagued by economic struggles, became a hub of hope and cooperation. The story of the Kindness Fund caught the attention of a national news outlet, which invited Sarah to share her journey on air. Nervous but determined, she told the world about the anonymous donor who inspired her and the power of believing in oneself. Though she didn't name Keanu, viewers immediately connected the dots and the story went viral. One day, Sarah received a surprising invitation. Keanu had asked her and her children to visit him on set. The kids were ecstatic, and Sarah was humbled by his continued kindness. On set, they watched him perform stunts and even got to appear as extras in a scene, an experience they would never forget. Sarah and her kids arrived on set, their excitement barely contained. Ella and Max marveled at the behind-the-scenes action, from the towering cameras to the intricate stunt rehearsals. Keanu greeted them warmly, taking time out of his busy schedule to give them a personal tour. Ella, ever the bold one, asked, "Is it hard being a hero in movies and in real life?" Keanu smiled, kneeling to meet her eye level. "Being a hero isn't about big things. It's about doing what you can, when you can. Your mom is a real hero, you know. She proves that every day." Sarah blushed, her heart swelling with gratitude as she saw her children light up with pride. On their way home, Sarah reflected on how far they'd come. The woman who once struggled to keep her head above water now felt empowered and inspired. She decided to pursue a long-dormant dream, starting a nonprofit organization to help single parents in her community. Naming it the Kindness Ripple Project, she envisioned it as a hub for families to find resources, encouragement, and support. With the help of the connections she'd made through the Kindness Fund and the Gala, Sarah secured funding to get the project off the ground. For the first time in years, she felt she was living a life filled with purpose. A few months later, Sarah received a handwritten letter from Keanu. In it, he expressed his pride in everything she had accomplished. "You've proven that one act of kindness can grow into something extraordinary. Your resilience and heart have inspired me and countless others. Keep going, Sarah. The world needs more of what you're creating." The letter was accompanied by a small donation to the Kindness Ripple Project, along with a simple request to remain anonymous in the organization's promotions. Sarah smiled, recognizing his trademark humility, and vowed to honor his wish. As the Kindness Ripple Project grew, it began gaining national attention. Other communities reached out to replicate its model, creating a network of programs to help struggling families across the country. Sarah found herself traveling to share her story, meeting people from all walks of life who had been inspired by the simple message to never stop believing. She often thought of Keanu during these moments, wondering if he realized how far his initial act of kindness had reached. Though she rarely saw him, she knew he was quietly rooting for her from the sidelines. Years later, Sarah stood on a stage at a major charity event, now a nationally recognized advocate for kindness and community building. Ella and Max, now teenagers, sat proudly in the audience. As she concluded her speech, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. "Kindness isn't just an action," she said, her voice steady. "It's a choice, a belief in the power of humanity to uplift one another. And it all starts with one spark." The audience erupted in applause, and Sarah caught sight of a familiar face near the back of the room. Keanu stood quietly, his smile soft and his applause heartfelt. Though he slipped out before she could reach him, Sarah knew their shared story wasn't about recognition. It was about the lives that had been touched along the way. Back at home that night, Sarah found a note tucked into her purse. "The ripple continues. Never stop believing. K." With tears in her eyes and hope in her heart, Sarah knew that her journey and the ripple of kindness was far from over.